Okay, so recording and welcome to week 5 of creative team management. Okay, so I've had a look at your assessments. Haven't actually done the marking yet, but I've had a look. Interesting results. Some of them are very, very good. All of them are sort of headed in the right direction. Just a couple of them need a little bit more work to sort of take it to the next level, I think. So for the next 2 assessments, I want you to try and think a little bit more about the concept of what we're talking about. So for example, the second assessment is about change. I want you to actually say something about it. So some of you were hinting towards it in your little animations when you were talking about creativity. You're portraying creativity, but quite often weren't really saying anything about it. So you just want to reiterate that as we go along, that it sort of should relate a little bit to the written component of the assessment. So it's really, it's about sort of displaying something about change, for example, change in the workplace from a creative point of view. So you've got a bit of chance there to say something about it. So for example, just analysing whether something's always good. Change, some people say change is always a good thing. Other people say are really adverse to it. So there's lots of different ways you can go with that. So I think for the next assessment, we'll try to do a bit more iteration on it. So when you get an idea, I'd like you to contact me and talk about the idea, and then we could take it from there. I think that might be a better way to go. Okay, so those should be marked this week. Just getting back to the lecture. So this week we're talking about motivation. And I can see from all of your faces that you're all pretty much masters of motivation. And having been at Collarts for a while now, we know that you're highly motivated students. And this is not a problem for you, but we're learning about it anyway. What we're learning about is how motivation works in the marketplace, in the workplace, in the creative organizations, and how this affects creative people. So what motivates creative people? And in the workplace, how does this affect how they are managed? And this is really the crux of what we're looking at today. So we're going to be looking at a couple of things today. We're going to be looking at intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. So motivation that comes from within and motivation that comes from the external sources, if you like. We're going to be looking at the role of something called grit in perseverance and long-term motivation. We're going to be looking at the different need theories. So there's a couple of theories we're going to be looking at. So we're going to be talking about people who have really outrageous names and their theories on motivation. So it's quite interesting to look at how these theories developed. We're going to be summarizing how to actually motivate individuals in creative organizations. And we're going to be looking at comparing the different motivational techniques, both for employees and for people who work in creative industries. So we're going to be looking at everything to do with motivation today. And we're going to, first of all, you have motivation to finish the semester. We're at week 5, so we're rapidly approaching the halfway point. So motivation for you guys, not just to finish the trimester, but to finish your degrees and to get all of your work out there. So when we talk about motivation, we're really talking about what your commitment is to what you're doing. So your craft, the thing that you're doing as your job, as well as the company or the organization that you're working for. So remember, it's not just a games company or an animation company. You could end up working for a museum or a non-for-profit organization or an arts organization or something like that. So why do we need to know this? Why are we delving into motivation? Because once you know what motivates creative people, to come up with good solutions. And we know that creativity involves coming up with new solutions to old problems using things that we know and combining, copying, transforming and combining. So what motivates people to do that, to come up with new concepts, new products, new experiences, all the things that you need to come up with in a creative role? How does that work? And what motivates people to actually turn up every day and do their job? And, you know, so there's a few clues in there as well. Organisation to maintain a productive, desirable place to work. So people want a productive and a desirable place to work. So we all have a need for that. So motivation in the workforce, loosely we can define it as a force that influences people to act or not act on something and helps to explain why we do things. So that's more of a general, a general definition of motivation. So it's really a driving force that compels us to act. That's our motivation. Okay. So in the workplace, our motivation can be influenced by things within us, internal things, or by external things. Very much at the mercy of senior management. You find that things do trickle down from management in terms of, we will talk about this in terms of behavior, workplace culture, like things like, you know, sexism or racism or homophobia or whatever, that tends to come from the top. If these sort of attitudes are prevalent in upper management, they will seep through into the rest of the company. So motivational forces, if you like, can be external or internal, influenced by senior management. And also very much for us, for people like us, it's driven, our motivation is driven by what our personal attachment is to the product. And oh, here we go. So depending on, and we spoke a little bit about this last week, in terms of when you're working on something, it might not be something that you really love, but I think when you were first trying to get into the industry, when you know your first job in the industry, you'll make it your business to love what you're doing because you'll just be, you know, getting into it and everything. So it can be driven by your attachment to the product. I think that changes as you go through in your career. So I think as you go through your career, you become more selective about the projects that you work on. Whereas when you first start off, you'll take anything and you'll love it because, oh my gosh, I'm doing texturing, but you know, it could be on something really naff that you wouldn't normally want to be associated with. So it really depends on your situation, how that's going to affect your motivation. So the reason you know, it's desirable to have motivated people, because people aren't motivated, they tend to, they'll either leave, they'll start slacking off and basically not performing. They'll just be sort of coasting along and not, you know, not doing enough to get sacked, but not doing enough to do a great job. And you don't really want people in that position because it's not good for them and it's not good for the company either, or anybody else. Okay. Oh, hi, Hannah, by the way. Welcome. Another thing about motivation in the workplace for creatives is that often we get paid a bit less than other people, and this is something that I've been talking about. I think, you know, it's wrong to assume that we should get paid less. The original, a lot of the text that I have read by people who weren't really in weren't in animation or games, but coming from a music point of view, we're saying that, you know, it's okay for creative people to get paid less, you know, it kind of almost keeps them in their place or something. And I just thought, no, that's wrong, stuff like that. That's absolutely wrong. We get paid by the workers because there is a perception that we get paid by doing the job itself, which may or may not be true. But you know, that's really none of anybody else's business when it comes to the payroll. We deserve to get paid the same as everybody else, and not to be disadvantaged because we're doing something that's creative. A lot of creative people, we draw motivation from within. It comes from within ourselves rather than extrinsic motivation. And also for creative people, you need to be good with self-imposed deadlines. So even doing something like what you guys are doing, which is doing your course, yes, you've got deadlines that are imposed externally, but if you don't have internal deadlines, if you don't know that, you know, oh, I've got to get this assignment finished tonight so that tomorrow I can start working on Tony stuff. If you don't have that ability, that's really kind of limiting you. So it's something that we really need to have. For a motivated person, it will generally have that sense of being able to set personal deadlines and actually stick to them. Okay, So now we're talking about these two different types of motivation, your internal or intrinsic motivation, or your external or extrinsic motivation. So what do we mean when we're talking about internal motivation? It's an internal state. So it's basically, it's like your resting state of motivation. So whether you're a motivated person, you're an energetic person or not, that's something that we often can't help. We're just sort of born that way. So it's an internal state that impels us to act towards achieving a certain goal. So that's really what we talk about when we mean what we mean when we talk about intrinsic motivation. So it's kind of like your base level giving us stuff. Intrinsic motivations allow us to find enjoyment and work through learning and a sense of accomplishment. That's something that creative people really need to do. When we're doing our jobs, we need to feel like we're learning and we're accomplishing something. It's not really within our wheelhouse to be doing something that has no meaning or has no sense of of actually achieving something. We also, as creative people, in terms of our motivation, we seek creative development. Now, sometimes that's something we trade for money. When we're entering a job situation, you might go, look, I'm going to go and work for this company that pays a bit less because it's a smaller company, it's run by a friend of mine, and I know I'll get a chance to do lots of different things. But at the same time, you might get offered a job with a bigger company where you'd be doing a much more formalized role. You might have a bit more money, but there might not be the opportunity to grow into that company. You might go, well, I can get a little bit more by getting to the top of what I'm doing, but it's going to be much harder to get experience of doing editing, doing cut scenes, doing playing with different shaders and all these different sort of research and development tasks, which you would get to do in a smaller company, but you wouldn't necessarily get to do in a bigger company. So that's part of our desire, is that because we've invested the time into being interested in all these things that we're interested in, you're investing time into coming to Collarts. You actually want to get some job where you're not just going to stop learning once you walk out the door here. You want to get a job where you're going to continue basically as if you're still at college and you're learning all of this amazing stuff all the time. So that's really quite important for us. Now, just a little break, just to have a bit of a chill out. Can anyone tell me anything about the image on the right? It might be before your time. I'm sure if I asked any of your parents or uncles or aunties, they would know the answer to this question. Can you tell me anything about the image on the right?
Is that the guy that, I don't know, it gets a lot of stuff, a lot of slack these days, but is that the guy who's like Wham! Stage of the Moon or something? The Honeymooners, I think it is.
Oh, it looks a bit like Jackie Gleason, yeah. Well, that's interesting you should bring that up, because the Honeymooners, which starred Jackie Gleason, who looks a bit like this guy, and another guy, that became the template for things like the Flintstones.
Okay.
And so the husband and wife thing, and that sort of wisecracking sort of duo. No, this is actually an Australian story. Have you ever heard of Norm from it was from the 70s or 80s?
You say Norm, I think Cheers. It doesn't work.
No, he looks a bit like Norm from Cheers, but no, there was an ad campaign back in the day, and it was hand drawn animation, so it was lovely. I think it was done in Sydney. I didn't recognise the name of the person who did it, but at the time it was very famous. It was an ad campaign in Australia called Life Be In It. And it was just motivating people to get off their asses and not to get fat and not to eat unhealthy food and stuff. And I was looking at this and I was thinking, because I just had this image here, and it's almost like a live action picture of what this Norm character looks like. And I was thinking, well, wouldn't it be great if the government had done something like that to do with vaccines? Get off your ass, go and have a vaccine, and everything will be fine. Just a different way of approaching things. So I'm just going to show
We still
you
have
this.
Karens.
What's that?
We'd still have Karens. It won't.
We still have Karens, yeah.
Also,
I think
don't we already have ads for getting vaccines?
Well, maybe we do, but it's not like it was prevalent. Not like this stuff. This stuff you would see a couple of times a day.
They're more like governmental. This is done by the Department of Health, sort of.
Yeah, it was a
Very
community
seriously
service.
sort of.
Yeah,
ads. I have seen a couple going around on TikTok. So there's been like animators who've been trying to draw like how the vaccine actually works, and it's just been really good. But
yeah, and I think this should have been out even before the vaccines were developed. and it should have been a community education program. Yeah, anyway. I'm going to pause now, and I'm going to show you a little clip. Okay, so just a little break to show you that. Interesting from the point of motivation, that was a very successful campaign at the time. It also kept animators employed, so it was hand-drawn animation, and so there was a little animation company that was kept afloat by those ads. I'd like to see more of that stuff sort of happening, and it's just a shame that it just didn't seem to happen for what's happening at the moment. I mean, there's some really good opportunities there to solve a few problems with one stone. Anyway, I will move on. So that's Norm. So that character's name was Norm from the Life Be In It campaign. It was a very big campaign. If you talk to anyone who's into advertising or marketing or something like that, it was renowned as one of the most successful campaigns ever in Australia. So that's why it was kind of important. So we're still talking about internal motivation here. So as creatives, we're motivated by the need to achieve self-fulfillment. Now, remember, we talked about this in the very first lecture as being one of the characteristics, I guess, of creative people is that we have this desire to have this kind of fulfillment through the creative process. It's why we do what we do. It's why we've found ourselves where we are now, is because, you know, we've had to decide along the track that we're not really suited for maths. We don't want to become you know, scientists or modelers, or, you know, using data or something like that, or go into law. We've decided that we're creative people through a number of processes, going through school, talking to our friends, talking to our parents, watching media, and we've decided that this is where we are. And we know that we need the creative act to be part of what we do, and that's why we've chosen where we are now. So according to Teresa Amabile, who I introduced you to last week, so in the 80s, she came up and debunked Wallace's theory, or didn't debunk it, she came up with a more iterative theory, and she actually characterizes the motivation or motivation traits in creative people as being self-determination, competence, task involvement, curiosity, enjoyment, and interest. So these are the things that affect motivation internally for creative people, according to Amabile. So I think most of those ring true to me. I think the last one, the enjoyment and interest, is almost a factor of whether you do the others or not. One of the most important points there, and I hear this from a lot of creative people, even Einstein once said, "I'm not very smart, I'm just insatiably curious." So the curiosity component of being a creative person is probably the most important thing there. And that's something that I think you should always try to hang on to, is that curiosity. Even when you're burnt out, you know, just try to keep that flame of curiosity alive, and that will really help you on your journey into creative industries. So we're now looking at external motivation, how we affect motivation externally, driven by external rewards, for example, like money. Money is a very common external reward. It works in some industries, and you can imagine, you know, it's quite logical in an industry or a community where people want to have creative development. We want to feel like we're growing creatively. The money is good. I mean, look, we love money, but there is a problem. It could be a deal breaker if there's no creative feedback in that job. Someone may decide, I don't want to do that because it takes me all out of creativity and just becomes a management job. So even though the money is better, you're usually paying for it by having less of that creative stuff, which again is kind of wrong. I don't think we should have to sacrifice one or the other. But that tends to happen in management jobs. If you're working in creative management, if you're working for a games company or an animation company, film company, advertising company, if you're working with creative people, the more you get into management, the less time you have for creative outcomes. And that means you tend to get more money. You could also have things like bonuses and commissions, or other forms of recognition. So that could be something like an industry award, you know, an ARIA award if you're working in sound design or music or something like that. There's not a lot of awards, you know, for animation per se, unless you're talking about the Oscars or something like that. But that's achievable as well. There have been 2 Australian animators have received Oscars for their efforts. And I know I've shown some of you before, but just as a pop quiz, can anyone name one of the 2 Australian animators who's won an Oscar? Just that's it. Who's typing in furiously? I'm going to let someone find the answer and then tell us which Australian animators have won Oscars.
Can I get points if I can recognize this
You
animation?
can get many points if you're first.
I mean, if I can recognize the animation that you've got here, that's not, yeah. It's in this pink flames.
Yes, it is. And the name is written there, Gerald Scarf.
Yeah.
She's the artist.
I can only find Adam Elliott for Academy Award.
Okay. Yes, Adam Elliott. And I think that was 2004 or something like that, or
Yes.
2004.
This
Yes.
animated film. I don't know what the film was.
It's Harvey Crumpet. It was definitely Harvey Crumpet. The other one was in the 1970s, and it was a chap called Bruce Petty, who was a newspaper cartoonist. So he won an Oscar for a film he made called Leisure or Leisure Time, I'm not sure. Yeah, so Australian animators have done very, very well. Okay. So I'm going to have a quick look at this this animation from Cindy.
Oh, it's great. I haven't watched it.
We need
Very
that on
good.
our TV.
What's that?
We need that on our TV and our
We
advertisements.
do. We need more cats and viruses on TV, that's for sure.
It's also just really simply explaining a process that's actually a lot more complicated than it looks.
Yes.
Like, anyone could watch that and be like, oh, that's how it works.
Oh no.
Whoa.
I mean,
Normal Australian, I'm
Sorry
I
about
think
that.
I think they explained it a little bit on what's it called? There's an anime called Cells at Work.
Yes.
I love it. And I'm pretty sure they covered vaccines or something in there as well.
Yeah.
Like, yes.
Okay. So there's lots of scope there, I think.
Cancer and stuff.
Sorry.
What's that, Jojo?
They cover vaccines and they also cover cancer growth too.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
And blood transfusions, and it's a great anime. If I have children, they're watching it, and there's no ifs and or buts.
Yeah. I think it should be more mainstream. We should see that. Okay, so that's just moving on from that. Yeah, so Adam Elliott and Bruce Petty, Australian animators who have won Academy Awards so far. Okay, so now we're going to learn about long-term motivation. So long-term motivation is also referred to as grit. And it took me a long time. It took me much searching to actually find a picture of grit. It's actually very hard sometimes to find images that go with the content of this course. So I'm very proud of that image. So it's perseverance and passion for long-term goals, characterized by your desire to stick with your future, not just to get through the next task, but to actually stick with it for years. So that's your long-term motivation. So your your driving force, if you like, for doing what you're doing, we refer to as grit. Now we're moving on. Now we're going to talk to some theories, if you like, regarding motivation. Now we're going to look at this chap, a guy called Abraham Maslow, and he's known as the father of humanistic psychology. And he created something called Maslow's hierarchy of needs. But I want to show you something funny before we do that. I'm sorry. Just going to pause a bit.
I mean, there's. No, we're recording now. It's all good.
What were you going to say, Cindy?
I said, I mean, there's the drug ecstasy, and then there's like the actual definition of ecstasy.
I was playing with
The guy was going for the definition rather than the actual drug.
I know, yeah, I was just being facetious.
The dopamines and stuff.
It's just funny. Okay, so we know from watching that video, when we're intense and focused, our concentration on what is being done in the present moment, it can sort of merge. Your action and your awareness becomes merged, which is really, really cool. We tend to lose reflective self-consciousness in that it tends to sort of just happen automatically. It's not, it's almost like, you know, when you first start doing this task, whatever it is you're doing, you're going through steps 1 to 5. And when you hit the flow, it's almost like there are no steps. It is just a continual process. And you're not even thinking about it. It's just kind of happening. You're aware of it, but you're not focusing on it. You're kind of almost a little bit detached from it at the same time. It's a very, very beautiful feeling that we are very fortunate to have. And we have a sense that we can control our actions, and we have a confidence in our actions that makes us feel as though whatever happens next, we'll be able to adjust to it. We'll be able to deal with it. So whatever happens next, we'll be able to cope with it. That's the sort of feeling we get when we're in that the zone of flow. Yes. So we also we talked about the distortion in temporal experience or time. So it's kind of like almost like time travel, but you only go one way, of course. So the process, and this is something that is interesting to talk about, because quite often we fall in love with processes as creative people. We have a particular process that we love doing, and just look on YouTube now, the number of videos that you can watch. And we were sitting there last night, actually watching someone create a wooden slab kitchen bench and putting it under a machine that was you know, planing it down to one thickness and filling the gaps with like epoxy resin and stuff like that. And it was just an amazing process. It was just absolutely beautiful. And it was beautifully shot and everything like that. And it was someone who actually makes a living doing that on YouTube. But the process is so intoxicating, and it's almost addictive. And getting involved in that process is something that we love doing. When people do get into that the zone or the flow, we can say, you know, with accuracy after, you know, scientific studies, that people are more creative in that zone. And also they tend to be creative for about a day or so afterwards of being in that zone as well. So it tends to last a lot. Now, remember right back to production design and art direction, I showed you guys a video of a guy called Rick Carter, who was a production designer on Jurassic Park, Avatar, and a few other productions like this. And he was talking about his creative process was that it didn't matter what style he was going to be working on, but if he knew that the next day he was going to be going to a meeting to meet with George Lucas or something like that to talk about the next project, he would do a day of painting beforehand, just so that he was in a creative mood. And when we were watching it, I remember thinking, oh, that's interesting. So that when he's talking to another creative person, he's kind of got, you know, he's still got the paint on his hands from having done his work the day before. But when you think about it in terms of flow, as we've just described it, it's the after effects of having been in the flow that makes him conducive to picking up on other people's creative ideas. And I just think, what a great idea. What a really good idea. And I included this picture here. I don't think anyone would be able to guess the artist. Does anyone want to have a guess at who the artist might be? I don't think you'll get it in a million years. In fact, I'll give you another free pass on your assessment if someone can tell me the artist.
Guys, we got to start having Google at the ready. Jeez.
It'd be hard to even
Yeah.
Google it, I think, unless you do a reverse image search. This artist is actually a guy called Hunter Biden, who is the son of the American president. He also does a lot of artwork. I actually quite like his stuff. Quite nice. Anyway, just wanted to share that with you. The day after the flow, it still has effects on you, so it's a very positive thing. So what does it all mean for organizations and encouraging creativity? It would seem to me it would be logical that you'd want to establish conditions where people can get into flow more often, more easily, and to facilitate that. So things like major breakthroughs, major achievements in the arts and in sports and in science, it all comes from being in this zone. So it's something about the way we look at managing creative people. We need to make sure that their environments are conducive to being in this zone. Okay, so how do we motivate creative people? You should have a fairly good idea of this yourself. But it goes back to
but not too many donuts, because you want to eat healthy.
Just
and
the
not
right
get
amount
obese.
of donuts.
Exactly.
Just
And then we bring in like cat memes and board games.
Cats.
Sound good with
I
everyone?
know how to motivate you now, Cindy. That's good. Okay, so so the strategies for motivating creative people, this ties together a lot of the ideas we've already talked about. So intrinsic strategies, so empowering employees through involving them. So all the things we talked about in the first lecture that creative people want. We want a sort of a non-authoritative leadership that gives people positivity and freedom to do their job. So we want that creative freedom. So it's very important for the empowering of employees that we do what we can to make people feel as though they can access that zone. And if you're in a situation in a creative company where you're supposed to be doing something creative and you just can't do it because you're stuck next to the air conditioner and the door to the toilet, and you've got people walking past you all the day, slamming the door and stuff, and I've been in lots of situations like that where you're the last person to get employed by a company, so you get the really terrible desk, and you just got to kind of put up with it. That's just something that happens. So that's intrinsic strategies, extrinsic strategies, as we've talked about, motivators such as rewards, accolades, money, and that sort of thing. Okay, so it can be a very important motivational tool, I guess, payment. But as we said in one of the other lectures, that they've done studies to see whether the motivation caused by money is as big as we think, and it is big, but it's not as big as we think, because creative people do want other things. We do want things like job satisfaction. We want to feel like there's personal and creative growth happening there as well. So money only goes to a certain level, if you like. So what about the suppression of creativity? Now, this is an interesting topic, and why are we even talking about it? I think that, from my experience of working for some bigger creative companies, like a big games company, for example, and creative people, creativity was, in a way, it was suppressed. And I've talked before about the sort of balance between, say, programmers and artists. And in a big company, the artists, even though you're producing a game, it might only be 1/3 of employees are actually creatives. The rest of them are doing other jobs like admin, doing finance, accounting, HR, all of this sort of stuff. So you do find that there is a bit of a hierarchy even within the company that creates, games for people to play. The artists are actually treated worse than everybody else. I've seen this happen in my own experience. And why is that? Why? And I've been scratching my head for a long time trying to work out why this is happening. It's slowly starting to solidify a little bit through teaching this course as well. And it tends to be that Muggles do tend to view us as being a bit strange or a bit having some kind of taint or something. That's the only thing I can think of. So with regards to suppressing creativity in a workplace, it can be internal political problems. So there could be a perception that creative people are, it could just be an attitude from management that you're smelly artists and we don't want anything to do with you. And that is kind of almost the vibe that we got from working at Infogrames, was that artists were really not welcome. We would do your job, do it well, but just stay out of sight. Okay. Harsh criticism of new ideas. So having someone in management just look at your screen and say that shit out loud in front of everyone can be very demotivational, and I've seen people do that. Destructive internal competition. Yeah, I've seen that happen as well, is where people are set up to actually undermine each other within a workplace. And it's absolutely terrible seeing that sort of thing happen. An avoidance of risk or emphasis on the status quo. So the idea of playing it safe and not wanting to do anything too creative. So these are all ways by which an organisation may consciously or unconsciously stifle creativity in the workplace. And these are things that you constantly have to fight against as a creative, just trying to do your job on a daily basis. So that's why this course is good, because it gives you a bit of an insight into how we are viewed by Muggles and also how Muggles operate, so that we can get what we want. So other motivational problems in the workplace, if you suppress creativity in a job where there are creative people, it's going to affect their motivation. They're not going to want to work. There'll be increased pressure. There could be unrealistic expectations as to their job, as to what they have to produce. The politics and the stress of work actually can distract from doing the work itself. And we know from the characteristics of creative people that we do tend to suffer from dissociative orders, stress disorders, anxiety, and things like that. And this is where these situations where you're working in a creative job for a company that doesn't treat creative people very well, it can actually set up some really interesting side effects for us as creative people. And I just want you to be aware of that going forward into the industry, that just because you're working for a company that calls itself Disney or whoever, that you may end up not happy in that company from a creative point of view because of the way you're being treated. And it's just a matter of finding out for yourself where you fit within that ecosystem, whether you're better off working for a small team or a big team and learning your chops and then going somewhere smaller. Everybody's different. So you need to just be aware and go into these situations with your eyes open. Okay, so I think that's it for most of the theory today. I do have some videos to show, so we're going to go and have a look at those. But before we do, there's a bit of light reading for between now and next week. Any questions about what we talked about today? Any questions about motivation? I'm just looking at you all going, I mean, motivation, it just sums up what I'm looking at. Just looking at all of these motivated faces. Any questions?
No.
No. You feel more motivated now, or you feel like, oh yeah, okay.
I've been working on my second assignment while you've been doing this, so yeah, let's say I'm motivated.
Good. You're motivated to do more creative work. And that's what I want you to do. I want you to turn all this gunk that we're talking about into something beautiful and meaningful and pithy and creative and something worth putting into your folio. So that's what I want the assessments to be for you. So I'd like everyone to get to me a bit earlier this time and to give me a rough idea of what they're doing, and we can even catch up and have a one-on-one and talk about your idea. Okay, so pretty good, the first lot of assessments. I just want to see more, I guess more from the point of view of thinking the topic. Okay, so in terms of okay, so the second one's about change, the third one's about conflict. In a way, the third one about conflict, it could have a bit more physicality in it, because you could take conflict, you could illustrate it any number of ways. But you know, the gist of it, and okay, I'll give you an example. We haven't got there yet, but with conflict, you actually need a certain amount, a small amount of conflict, not physical violence, but just conflict within an organization. It actually stimulates creativity, actually stimulates development of better ideas, better solutions to problems. If you have too much conflict, of course, it can be very bad. If you have too little conflict, then you sort of settle into that apathy zone that we were talking about before with the in the flow diagram. So you know, it's one of those it's one of those things that you need to think about. Okay, so what I'd like you to do is to get to me as soon as possible and to give me
Would you
your
like to catch up after class?
I won't have time straight after class, I'm sorry. Do you want to send me what you've got?
Yeah, there is.
That would be good. I've just got to, I have to leave at exactly.
That's unacceptable. I'll be putting this in your end of year thing.
Okay. So got some resources here. One, overcoming laziness, inside the mind of a master procrastinator. Screw motivation, what you need is discipline. So I was going to show you the master procrastinator. Has anyone seen Inside the Mind of a Master Procrastinator?
Is that a TED Talk?
It is a TED Talk.
With the monkey?
Yes.
Yeah, I got sent that by a psychologist.
Okay. I think maybe we should all have a look at it. I'm just going to check this one because
Wow, psychologists really put you on blast, hey?
Well, I did approach her and say, look, I'm procrastinating way more than I would like to. I'm not getting stuff done. I was studying with another college at the time. I was bored. I wasn't getting that challenge that I needed. And
yep.
Yeah, yep.
we're gonna have a look at it because it's worthwhile.
It is good. It's her way of saying, look, don't be so hard on yourself. Everyone procrastinates.
What's that?
The life calendar thing kind of scared me.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, totally. That could be your homework, is to draw up a life calendar and then cross out
Don't do it.
the
I'm
Don't do
good.
it.
No, I'd rather not.
I'm
Oh,
going
no,
to
that
go
was really
and play with my monkey after this. But did any of you...
And hated it so much.
What's that, Hannah?
I've never felt so seen and hated it so much. Just everything he said. I
know. Look, it's a common thing, and I think we all do it. God knows. I mean, how many of us have done, assessments the night before?
Yep.
Yeah.
Even I've done it. So I did it during my masters. Just one of those things. But we can see how it is a balance, and depending on where you sort of situate yourself. And if we go back to that idea of being in the flow, it can be sort of a way of protecting yourself a bit. If you turn up every day and you do what you can do to get into that flow situation, you are avoiding the anxiety, and you're also avoiding the boredom. I think anxiety and boredom just go hand in hand sometimes. And so I think it's that regular thing. Right back in week one, we talked about creative people and their practices and stuff like that, and various people like Nick Cave, and all these people say the same thing about creativity. It's not about the magical channeling of an idea. It's about turning up every day and doing your thing. And I think it's healthy to be worried about procrastination. I think it's healthy to have a bit. If you thought, no, I never procrastinate, you're probably misleading yourself, because I think we all do, just to different degrees. And that's part of, what has to happen in life when you start working in the creative industries is finding a situation where you find it hard to procrastinate. So having structures around you to stop that from happening very important. And it could be, you know, something you need to take into account when you're deciding whether you're going to be a freelancer or not, a freelancer or someone who works for a company or something like that. Because, you know, if you're freelancing, it has to be something that you really want to get out of bed in the morning to do, because if you don't, you're going to find it very hard to get out of bed in the morning. It's a very hard gig. Freelancing sounds like the most wonderful thing you can do, and it does have many benefits, and it seems like a wonderful lifestyle, but it's incredibly hard to make a living. And depending on your personality, so everyone is different as well. So every person would have different abilities when it comes to working on their own or working for a big company, whether they need to work for a big company. We've got a little bit of time left, so I was just going to have a look at this other resource on overcoming laziness. Now, I'm not showing you this to make you feel bad, and I think I've got a bit of an issue with the term laziness, especially people who like to brand other people as being lazy. And I think creative people get blamed or get called lazy a lot because, you know, especially in Australian culture, if you're a kid who likes to sit inside and read books and watch movies and you're not running around on a football field or a netball court, people think you're a bit odd. So there are cultural things in there as well, but it's sort of...
Someone once told me that it's not always laziness, it's just working smarter.
Yeah, that can be a lot to do with it as well. So the way you do something, people might say, oh, that's a bit lazy, but you're actually being more productive. You're using less energy. You're making yourself less tired just in the way you do something. So no, it's not laziness. And I think some people mistake creative pursuits as laziness as well. Sometimes as creatives, we just need to sit. And I remember reading an interview with Reg Mombassa, the Kiwi, you know, but Australian artist. He was the guitarist out of Mental as Anything. Really amazing guy, really amazing artwork. And he was saying that, yeah, sometimes he just has to have a day where he can't work in the studio, but he'll sit in the studio and read a history book or something, even though he can't do the work, still turning up and doing it. So sometimes, you know, if you're trying to do some modeling, you know, and it's just not happening, you need to stay at your desk and maybe do something else, but just to sort of stay there and turn up and do the job. So I think laziness is sometimes used as an attack term or as a label that people put on other people to make themselves feel better, because there is a lot of emphasis on the Australian work ethic about being a go-getter, about being proactive, about being, you know, laziness is probably one of the biggest sins you can have in the workforce in Australia. So it's just one of those things. Maybe that was just my family growing up, was like laziness was the worst thing you could do. In fact, it was almost like, you know, you could murder someone. That wasn't as bad as being lazy. Not quite to that extent, but yeah, it just seems to be a really big thing. And I've since noticed that it is a labeling technique, that people label other people as being lazy when they don't actually understand what they're doing, or they look like they're not doing much. If someone's doing something that's esoteric or using their brains, it can be seen as, oh, you're just sitting around doing nothing. It's not the case. Okay, so we're going to have a look at what a nice sentiment to end on. Interesting stuff. Yeah. Have any of you ever experienced that? Have you known anyone who is really incompetent but thinks they're absolutely amazing at what they do?
I recently found out someone who's pretty much the Australian version of Logan Paul, and I think he's really up there.
The Australian version of what?
Logan Paul. I'm interested to hear that one.
I don't know. It was on Isaac Butterfield's video. I can go find it out, but he was a real twat face and needs to punch him.
What was he doing?
Fair enough.
How do I put it? He's a young kid. I'm guessing he's a young kid. He looks like he's in his early 20s. Who's pretty much living off of his girlfriend's OnlyFans income, but acting like he's the best in the world and has the hottest girlfriend, and talking about how he's eating his girlfriend's stuff every day, and I'm like, why do you have money? Why are you not? What is this?
Sounds like a fine example of humanity.
I hate humanity.
You want to go and
Look,
pat
as a whole, we're not great, but one by one, people.
Individually, some of you are okay. Can't talk about myself. We just leave that into another basket.
Interesting stuff. Okay, any comments or questions about today's lecture? Motivation. So I don't know if this has given you more motivation or not, but at least now you know more about motivation. So maybe next time you're procrastinating, just think about that little monkey and maybe open up the box with the panic monster in it a bit sooner than you would have previously. Probably.
And sometimes it just doesn't work.
Well, that's it. When you've got the panic monster jumping out at you for no reason, that's not good either. Okay, so what I'd like you to do, Cindy, if you can send me something about your project.
I already sent it.
Oh, good on you. And maybe we can catch up on Monday, but I'll have a look and get back to you. Anyone else, if you've got any ideas about your second assessment, please send me an email or send me an email to discuss the idea or to organise a time to meet up.
I think Hannah's a bit stuck on her second assessment. She doesn't know what she's doing.
The fish.
Oh, I was doing the.
It was
the first assessment that I had issues with, and managed to grapple together.
I was trying to be funny. Don't mind me.
Oh.
You need
You can't use sarcasm on me.
special over my head. Tish. Yeah, it's Friday afternoon. You've been working hard, Hannah. It's all good. But it is Friday afternoon. So,
oh my God.
Yeah, so have a wonderful weekend, everybody. Please get in contact with me with your ideas, and I'll see you next week. So have a good one. Stay safe. Stay safe. Don't come to Queensland. Okay. See ya.
That's it.